Hello, everyone, and welcome to our podcast. Today is a special day because I have the pleasure of chatting with someone who is not only a world-renowned expert in networking, but also a very good friend of mine, Dr. Ivan Misner. Now, Ivan, as many of you know, is the founder of BNI, which stands for Business Networking International, which is the largest business networking organization in the world. With 199 chapters, I learned today, over 314,000 members in 79 countries around the world. And Ivan can correct me. It keeps growing day by day. The New York Times bestselling author, written 29 books. He's been featured in the LA Times, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, as well as the BBC and the Today Show on NBC. He's been called the father of modern networking by CNN and one of the top networking experts in the world by Forbes. He's considered by most to be one of the world's leading authorities on the topic, and the John C. Maxwell organization actually named him the Transformational Leader of the Year. And in our rapidly changing world, as you know, where we connect and build relationships, that whole area is constantly evolving because of all the AI things that are happening and so forth. And I believe understanding the power of networking is more crucial now than ever. And Ivan's insights into this are profound. And his new book called The Third Paradigm, which he co-authored with our mutual friend, Dalwa Phillips, tackles some of the most pressing challenges we face today in the areas of collaboration and conflict resolution. Now, Ivan and I have shared many great conversations over the years. Today, we're going to dive into how effective networking and resolving conflicts can not only improve our professional lives, but also enhance our personal connections. So whether you're dealing with a tough team dynamic, a challenging boss, or simply looking to broaden your network, Ivan has very practical and actionable advice that he can help you with. So Ivan, it's always a joy to catch up with you, and I'm thrilled to share this conversation with our listeners. So welcome.
Thanks. It's great to be on your podcast. I appreciate the invite.
I appreciate that too, you're being here, because I know how busy you are. I just came back from, I think, like 2 weeks in Vietnam, and so glad to be here. You don't look jet lagged to me, so it's all good.
Not too bad. And I stopped saying that I'm busy, and I've tried to say that I have a very full life, because everybody says they're busy, but I have a very full life. Sometimes it's a little more full than others.
Yeah, I can relate, as you know. So anyway, let's talk about the importance of networking today as we're seeing seismic shifts in global business landscapes. And now we got digital transformations like AI. Everyone's in the Zoomiverse like we are right now. Can you talk about why networking is more important than ever for professionals across all different sectors of business, which I know BNI deals with?
Yeah, listen, networking is all about building relationships. We tend to look at networking as a transactional process. And one of the reasons for that is that we don't teach this in colleges and universities. We don't teach networking in colleges and universities to this day. And I understand why. Most full-time tenured professors, they control the curriculum and they've never run a company. So they don't understand how important it is to network, and they don't understand sales and closing techniques. And so they don't teach networking, but yet networking is as important as ever. The key is that it's about building relationships, not about transactions. Transactions are about sales, relationships are about networking. And I think that's the best way to build a business.
Talk a little more about that trend. I mean, I remember that, I forget his name right now. He's from Texas. He was running for president and he was a big sales guy. And he said, I'm not interested in transactions and sales. I'm interested in long-term relationships. Talk about the difference between that for a minute.
Well, one of the things that's interesting is a book that I did a number of years ago was about networking and gender, the difference between men and women and how they network. And we found that men tended to be more transactional in the way they networked, and women tended to be a little more relational in the way they networked. And we found that women actually spent less time networking and generated more of their business through networking than men did. And they were more relational in how they did it. So we then took a look at, we merged men and women, the data of men and women, and looked at transactional versus relational. And we found that men and women who were relational in the way they networked generated more business through their networking efforts than men and women who didn't. And what happens with networking is that people oftentimes, because they're not trained to build relationships, they say, "Hi, Jack, my name's Ivan. Let's do business." Or worse yet, "Here's 3 or 4 of my business cards. Maybe you'll give 3 of them to some other people." And I'm like, really? When people do that to me, it's like, I don't even know you. I'm not going to give your business cards to other people.
Yeah, well, let's go back to the basics a little bit for a few minutes. I know we want to talk about your new book as well, but you talk about visibility, credibility, profitability. Can you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, you invited me to contribute to your Success Principles book
Success
on
principles.
that
Yep.
very topic, and it's really the foundation of what I teach. People generally. Let me set it up by telling you this event that I went to in London, where I saw people just trying to sell, and there were like 900 people in the audience, and I said, "How many of you are here today hoping to maybe just possibly sell something?" And 900 people raised their hands. I mean, the whole room was like, "Yeah, that's why I'm here. I want to sell something." I said, "How many of you are here today hoping to buy something?" No one raised their hands. Not a single person. And this is what I call the networking disconnect, where people show up wanting to sell, but nobody's there to buy. So why go to a networking meeting? You go to work your way through the VCP process: visibility, credibility, profitability. First, you have to be visible. People have to know who you are and what you do. Then you establish credibility, where people know who you are, they know what you do, they know you're good at it. And then and only then can you get to profitability, where people know who you are, they know what you do, they know you're good at it, and they're willing to refer business to you on an ongoing basis. Now, you talked about how many chapters B&I had. We have 11,000, almost 200. But we generated last year, because our focus is on relationships, we generated 24 billion with a B. We did 15 million referrals, $24 billion worth of what we call thank you for closed business. That's the amount of business that members generated. And that's based on members' reports, not ours. They put the data into our system. Now, just to put that in perspective, this is the power of relationships. Based on United Nations estimates, there are actually 100 countries in the world with a lower GDP than what B&I generated in thank you for closed business for our members last year. That's the power of relationships and networking.
So talk a little more about building relationships. You have a wonderful story I'd love you to share about two guys that didn't want to interact with each other, didn't think they had anything in common. And then you did an exercise with them that you've sometimes done in groups that I've co-led with you about common interests and how that evolved. Can you share that story? Do you know what
If it's the one I'm thinking of, I can't believe you remember that. Is that the two insurance agents?
What had to do with soccer coaching, I think, something like that.
Oh, yeah. Remember? Okay. The gains exchange. So, So one of the things that we do and that I recommend when people are doing one-to-one meetings with someone is to do what we call the gains exchange. And that's an acronym: goals, accomplishments, interests, networks, and skills. And we had these two gentlemen, and I was doing this exercise where we were testing this out to see if it worked. And one of them said, "We don't want to do it." And I was like, "Why?" And he said, "Because it's weenie. It's weenie. It's silly. I don't want to do it." He was an architect. He thought it was silly. And I'm like, "Okay, well, do me a favor. Just do it. And I'm going to give a review at the end. And you can write in the review that it was weenie. It was silly and you didn't want to do it, but you did it." He said, "Okay, fine." So he did it with another guy, which was an attorney, and the two of them are talking, and they're going through each other's goals. So, one person gave their goals, then the other gave their goals, then their accomplishments. They got the interests, and they found out they were both soccer coaches of their sons' soccer teams. Forget about the rest of the gains exchange. They spent the rest of the half hour just talking about soccer and coaching techniques. And they decided they would film for each other. So one would go scout the other team and film, and the other would scout. And they ended up really making a great connection. Well, that was fantastic. And they did a good review on the technique, which we've incorporated in books. But what was amazing was these two guys had never actually referred business to each other. Never. Not because they didn't like each other. They just didn't know each other. And yet they'd been in the same group for 9 months. After 30 days, they had both given each other a referral. How did that happen? It happened because they built a relationship. They cared about each other, and they were looking out for each other. And so soccer, the fact that they both coached a soccer team was the glue that built the relationship that made them want to refer each other and help each other. And I see that over and over again.
Now, when I started to ask you this question, you started to smile and you said, "I can't remember you remember this story. And then you talked about two insurance agents. I want to hear what that story is about.
Well, that one's definitely different, but it's about how sometimes it's really about cooperation and competition. And there was two insurance agents that one was an older guy, very, he'd been in the insurance business for quite a few years. He did a lot of financial planning, big companies. And the other one was a very young, new, I say insurance, but it was really investment planning. And he was new. He'd only been in the business 2 or 3 years, but he grew up in a very affluent family. And he had a lot of really affluent contacts. And so he started getting this business with these high net worth clients. And the older, more mature investment guy was like very frustrated that this young kid is getting these big clients. And he was talking to me about how annoyed he was. But I said, look, just talk to him. You're both with the same company. Mentor him. He's like, I don't know if I want to mentor him, but okay, I will. And so he did. He mentored him. And what the funny thing is, the young man was like, I to tell you the truth, I don't know how to handle these big, high net worth clients. Could you and I partner up? And I'll bring them in, and you run the admin of it, because I don't know how to do all the investments with it. I'm reasonably new, but I've got the great contacts. So these two people, who certainly the older guy looked at the other one as competition, but the truth is that by working together, the older guy ended up getting making way more money, because he worked with somebody that could have been a competitor, but because he cooperated, it ended up being a great relationship. And it was such a fantastic story. Coopetition, that's a great example of coopetition.
If I was Oprah, I'd go, coopetition. She always does that when there's a new word, So I'm curious. Well, I want to share with you a story. We had two guys. We had this little mastermind group we were running, and we're trying to recruit this new one to join it. And he was a financial planner, and this other guy was already a financial planner in the group. And I know you normally don't get two people in the same industry, but anyway, for us, we really wanted him. We knew him from another training. They were both great guys. And he thought, he's going to steal my ideas and and I don't want to go in there. And after about 3 sessions, they became mastermind of partners. Like every week they would talk to each other, share things together. They actually became best friends, went on vacation together. I mean, it was amazing. The fears that get in the way of just being open and supportive. And you talk about giver's gain. Talk about that for a moment.
Well, giver's gain is a really powerful concept that I incorporated into BNI years ago. And it's really about the concept of what goes around comes around, that if I help you, you'll help me, and we'll all do better as a result of it. But to me, it's more than a phrase. It's a way of living one's life. It's a perspective to view and interact with the world. It's an attitude, not an expectation. And when it's applied properly, it'll change your life. And when it changes enough lives, it'll change the world. And that's what we're trying to do in BNI, is change the way the world does business by this cooperation with other business professionals. It's an abundance mentality instead of a scarcity mentality.
Well, I love that. It's an attitude, not an expectation. You're not giving because you think you should get back, but you're giving because it becomes kind of who you are. You're coming from a more generous perspective. And then the rules of the universe seem to be that what you give out comes back and often multiplied. So that's way cool. So you got this new book, Third Paradigm, addresses the topics of co-creation and resolving conflicts with teams. And so let's talk about your new book. How would you like to introduce the concept of that? What's it about, and what do we learn from it?
The first paradigm of business was competition, and you're talking about the transition from the 1800s to the 1900s, the management theory, the Galbraiths, Gantz, Frederick Taylor. It was all about productivity. The second paradigm was about cooperation, theory X, theory Y, with McGregor and MBO, Drucker. It was all about people. And today in the 2020s, it's like obvious. But back in 1960, you're talking about people being important in business. It was radical. It was crazy. And I studied under Warren Bennis at the University of Southern California, and he worked with McGregor, and he said they were getting bomb threats because it was radical thinking that people were important.
Oh my God.
And now the third paradigm is about co-creation. which is collaboration on steroids. It's actually producing something together. And the best example of it is crowdsourcing. Crowdsourcing is a great example of the third paradigm. So in the process of co-creation, there's a lot of conflict. Because if you're working together with a group of people to actually create something, you get conflict. And so in the book, we have a whole series of recommendations in dealing with conflict, one of which is I called Listen Till They Drop. And the concept is just shut up and listen. And that's not easy. I mean, I talk about this in the book, and there was an example where I had to sit and listen for 2 hours as people complained about something. 2 hours they complained. And it was like, shut the bad word up and listen. And I would write on a flip chart every complaint they had. I wallpapered the entire room. I listened until they dropped. It was a little bit like the Rumble in the Jungle with, I think it was Foreman and Ali, where Foreman just beat the heck out of Ali until, he just took all the punches until, boom, he came out and ended up, I think, in the 8th round with a knockout. And it was because he listened until Foreman just got tired. And then once you've listened, they're open to ideas. But they're not open until you've really let them vent. And in this particular case, and we share this in the book, Dawa and I share it in the book, at the end of this 2-hour beating that I got, and by the way, we never say it's me. We talk about some guy named Richard. Richard's my middle name. And the online platform we talk about is BNI Connect. But we never say that because we didn't want it to be about me. We wanted it to be about the story. So I said, are you guys open to an idea? They said, yes. And I told them, okay, how about we put together a project board that we work together and we create the solution together. And I handed out buttons that said Eggbok. EGBOK, Eggbok. And they're like, what's this? And I said, everything's going to be okay, you guys. Eggbok. Everything's going to be okay. And you're going to love this. I had Fred Johnson at the conference sing a song. I know it sounds crazy, but he came in and he sang a song. Everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay. And I had people who were so mad at me, Jack, they were like ready to draw and quarter me in the courtyard. And they're standing up singing with Fred, everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay. So that's part, learning how to deal with conflict is an important part of the third paradigm. Do you want 2 or 3 more techniques to use?
I love, go ahead, please.
So one is allow barking dogs in the room. People are going to complain. They're going to be upset. And you got to make sure that some of the barking dogs get in the decision-making room. And that's very frustrating and very difficult. But if you don't allow the barking dogs in the room, they're going to bark outside of the room. And they're going to undermine whatever plan you have. They're going to undermine because they're going to be barking with everyone. It's better that you bring some of them in the room, not a lot, but bring in 1 or 2 so that they're represented with whatever issue that they're dealing with. You got to allow everyone to speak. Everyone's got to be able to talk. And one of the things that you have to constantly deal with is it's okay to disagree without being disagreeable. I can't tell you how many times in this particular project that I'm referring to, I had to sit down with people and say, it's okay to disagree, but you got to be polite about it. You can disagree without being disagreeable. And that's what a co-creative leader does is they coach and guide people to work together rather than to fight one another. Can you imagine politics if it were like that? Working together? Oh my goodness, what a strategy that would be.
So you're in a room with someone and you say, it's okay to disagree, but it's not okay to be disagreeable.
Yeah.
What's disagreeable? Do they get it? And what behaviors do they then realize that this is not okay to do? Like unpack that just a little bit if you can.
Yeah. So when they start raising their voice, when they start, I wouldn't say yelling, but really, when they start raising their voice and if there's any name calling or if there's any comments like, you don't know what the hell you're talking about kind of thing,
Hmm.
That's when on multiple occasions I've said, okay, let's take a break and get some coffee, have a drink, and some water or whatever, and let's get back together in 10 minutes. And then I would pull that person aside and I'd say, your point's valid. It's totally valid, but they're not going to hear what you have to say the way you're saying it. They're just going to get
Hmm.
defensive and confrontational. So bring
Hmm.
it back down a little bit, address the issue. And sometimes, particularly, when you get a diverse group, you get someone from marketing who is talking to an IT person in the room, and they're like, they don't know anything about marketing. Why are they here? And of course, the funny thing is the IT person is saying they don't know anything about the technology. Why are they here? Well, you both need to be there. You both need to listen to each other and have a conversation with each other. And you can disagree. Here's the key thing that we say in the book that I think is really important. Hold the vision, not the obstacles. So in this particular case, the vision was to complete this online program, this online project. Hold that vision, not the obstacles. There are always obstacles. Mutual friend of ours, Mark McCurgow, wrote the book Solutions Focus. And in there, he
Right.
said, if all you do is focus on the problem, you become an expert at the problem. What you have to do is focus on the solutions. And I quote Mark in the book, you have to focus on the solutions. Hold the vision, not the obstacles. Does that make sense? And so in the conversations with people, I'd keep, let's go back to the vision. Here's the vision. How do we get there? Oh, and Crucial Conversations, the book Crucial Conversations. There's a great
Right.
technique. They call it the feasible and. How can we do what you're talking about and do what he's talking about? How do we put those
Hmm.
together, the feasible and?
Right. I always call that a synthesis. You get two opposites,
Yeah,
and something above that synthesizes and integrates both of
yeah,
them. I've been on Fox News and I've been on CNN and MSNBC. And the reason is I think people should be held responsible for their actions, but I also think we need compassion in the world.
yeah.
And when I do both of those together and not one or the other, they both can hear me. I want to share something else too. It's interesting because I agree with everything you're saying. I have an exercise I'll do with people when they get confrontational. I'll bring them up on stage and I'll say, put out your hand,
Mhm.
and I'll push on their hand. They instantly resist me.
Yeah.
And then I say, go ahead, push on my hand again. They push on it. I simply step back, grab their hand, and redirect it the other direction. It's like I'm listening, and now you'll listen to me because I listen to you. It's an Aikido technique, but basically it tells people you have to be listening. And I'm sure Dawa and you, I don't even, maybe you put it in the book. I didn't read the whole book yet, but the idea that the Zen Buddhist teacher guy comes in and they're going to do a tea ceremony, starts pouring the tea, and eventually the tea is overpouring. And the guy says, wait, it's overpouring. He says, there's no more room in the cup. He says, I know, it's like your mind. There's no more room in your mind for anything new. We
Yeah.
have to empty the cup before anything new can come in.
Yeah.
And I think that's so true.
I think that martial arts thing that you're talking about, I think it's called Tenkan. And yeah, I
Tenkan?
think that's what it's called. And the idea and the full concept is as you push, you let the person in and then you put your arm around them. And so
Yeah, there you go.
that you really draw them into you. And
Yeah.
it's a martial arts technique. Yeah.
Yeah, I should tell everyone you're a black belt or beyond in
Yeah. First
martial
degree
arts.
black belt in Shotokan.
First degree black belt, yeah. So yeah, that's so true. Like, you can even turn them around and walk with them and say, "Oh, I hear what you're saying. I get your idea." And now, well, listen to me, and you just instantly turn them. It's so illustrative. Okay, I cut you off. You said there was more.
Oh, I
and
got
said,
lots
"Wait a
more.
minute."
Here's another technique in the book. Don't go too fast to get where you want to go. And here's a great story to go with it. I have a good friend, Dr. Emery Cowan, and when he was a young man, he lived in Atlanta. He was driving down the highway, and they were selling peaches on the side of the road, and he bought a big bushel of peaches, and he lived alone. But he loved peaches, and he was eating them every day. But after about 3 or 4 days, there was still a lot of peaches left. And he walked downstairs from his bedroom, and he could smell the peaches, and they were maybe getting a little too ripe. So he went to his parents' house. They had a recipe for peach wine, and he did he got the recipe, and he emulsified all the peaches and ran them through cheesecloth and put in yeast and whatnot. and he took it down to the basement, and then he would check the wine in progress every 2 or 3 days, and it just wasn't going very fast. And he's like, I want to speed this up. So he brought it all back up. He ran it through the blenders again. He put in some more yeast and emulsified. He put in some more stuff and took it back down to the basement. And he said he went down 3 days later and he tasted it. And he said it was the best peach vinegar he'd ever tried in his life. And he said, sometimes if you push things too fast, it just goes bad. And so you got to take your time and work through the issues. Don't force the issues.
Right. I'm reminded of the old thing where someone's growing carrots and every day they pull them up to see how they're doing.
Not a good idea.
Doesn't work. What else?
Well, let's see. So in co-creation, you absolutely have to give up control to gain engagement. And that's very difficult for the CEO of a company, for the founder of a company to give up control in order to gain engagement. But it's very powerful. And if you are willing to give up a certain amount of control, and so in this project that I was talking about, I gave up all control on what things got done first. It was completely up to the project board. The only thing I stepped in on was the budget, because I can only afford what I can afford. So I gave them a budget. Otherwise, I said to them, I will not veto anything you decide. It's all up to you. That's difficult for an owner to let go of. But by letting go, I gained so much engagement that the same project that 1 year earlier, they were ready to draw and quarter me in the courtyard over, got released to great success. It's now the basis of our organization. When I told you that we did 24 billion, that's because we know that from this platform. By the way, as of this morning, we had 326,000 members, 326,540 members. I get a daily report from the platform that was almost a disaster.
It's so funny. I can remember telling the world, oh yeah, they have 60,000 chapters and then 90, now where you are. And literally when we were getting together to do this podcast, I had one of my staff do some research and it was like 100, I don't know, 314. Anyway, whatever it was way below what it is now. And I'm just going like, oh my God, it just grows so fast. But that's the nature of things as they get bigger and you got more and more people enrolling people and inviting people and so on and so forth. Let's talk about, I know that you are you're the founder of this organization. You're still kind of the figurehead out there.
They call me the chief visionary officer.
Chief visionary officer. And you've got other people running a lot of the logistics now and growing everything. But as you're running all this and let's talk about scaling up. You started this business, as I remember, you were living out in Southern California and you started one group. And now you have all these groups all around the world. And a lot of people watching this, listening to this are going, okay, I'm starting a business. And if you had some, here's some scalability principles or ideas, share that with you.
So I'm actually working on a book called Garage to Global. How do you take your business from your garage?
Well, that must be intuitive. See, here we go.
You are. How do you take your business from your garage? Which my business, literally, I started in my home. It was in my garage and in a spare room above my garage. And how do you turn it into a global enterprise? So there are a number of things that you want to do. And the first is you have to create systems for your business. And you have to write everything down. And when I started BNI, I read The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. Michael's become a good friend. And one of the things he says is write everything down as though you plan on franchising your business, even if you have no intention of franchising your business. Well, I had no intention of franchising my business, but that's a pretty good idea. So I wrote everything down. And a few years into it, it's like, well, why not franchise this business? And so because I had created systems and written everything down, what worked and what didn't work, I was able to franchise the business. The next thing is understand that teaching people your business is a leaky bucket process, meaning when you teach me how to do something, some of the information leaks out. And when I teach somebody else, more information leaks out. And so having everything in writing helps to make sure that the leaky bucket is filled a bit so that you're not constantly making up stuff, because people love to make stuff up. If you only have a half a bucket of information, people start putting in their own stuff, which is not generally good.
Mm-hmm.
You want to scale your business? Here's the secret to delegating. We're all taught in business school that, the importance of delegation, but we don't learn it quite the way I like to describe it. You have to delegate not only responsibility, but you have to delegate authority. You delegate responsibility and authority. Now, you can't delegate 100% authority to a learner. So somebody who's learning their job, delegate 50% authority. So you have the authority to make decisions within this box. Anything outside that, you go to your supervisor, come to me. But then as they grow and as they learn the business, you give them more and more and more authority. And when I was running the company, I don't run it the day-to-day operations now, but when I was running the company, I would give people up to 95% authority. The only two things I held back was if an attorney was involved, come see me, and a budget. You had a number. Now, the budget for the receptionist was different than the budget for the COO, right? Different number, but still a budget. If it's over that number, come see me. So you have to delegate responsibility and authority. And here's where people really take it wrong. They go, it'd be quicker to do it myself. Yeah, for a little while, but not if you want to scale, you can't do everything yourself. Yeah, but I do it better. Yeah, but you can't do everything better. You're going to actually do it worse. So you got to train people and then delegate responsibility and authority. And they say, well, what if they make a mistake? I said, well, don't worry about them making a mistake. They will. It's inevitable. That's part of their learning. I remember a woman came to me. She had the authority to make a decision up to like $5,000. And she made this decision and it went completely wrong. And we lost $5,000. And the company was a lot smaller then. And that was big. And I remember she came into my office and she said, are you going to fire me? And I said, well, let's talk. Did you learn anything from this? And she answered the question as to what she learned. And it was clear to me that it wasn't carelessness, that it was just a bad decision that she made and it wasn't on purpose. And so she gave a good answer as to what she learned. And I said, if you were confronted with that in the future, what would you do different? And she gave a good answer to that. I said, okay, no, I'm not going to fire you. And she said, why? She said, thank you. Why are you not going to fire me? I said, because I just invested $5,000 in your training. It doesn't make sense to fire you. And that's the kind of attitude that you have to have if you want to scale, is that you have to give people responsibility and authority once they're in a position of understanding the job. You give them almost complete authority. Does that make sense?
Totally. Raymond, Aaron, and I are writing a book about the power of creating wow experiences for your customers and your clients.
Yeah.
And we interviewed the head of culture or something like that. I forget his exact title now at the Ritz-Carlton company. And he told us all these stories. I didn't know this, but everyone at Ritz-Carlton has the ability to make a financial decision in the favor of the hotel guests. For example, if you missed your flight because we didn't call you in the morning and the room service wake you up in the morning, thing didn't work, the person at the desk has the authority to actually book you a new flight, make your next stay free, whatever it might be. And the reality is they all have different levels of how much they can do that with.
Exactly.
But they all have that authority, even the people that clean the rooms. And this one guy told me this story that would create a Ritz-Carlton for Life customer about how this boy had come and he had brought his little pet, like a stuffed giraffe, and he left it there. And they got to the airport and he didn't have it. He was inconsolably crying. And this guy sent someone out to find him, and they texted him and said, we found him. Tell him no. We talked to him, and the giraffe said he just wanted 2 more days of vacation. And so then they took pictures of him with sunglasses on, a chaise lounge at the pool, playing golf, eating dinner, getting a massage. And then they sent all those pictures with the stuffed animal in a leather bound whatever, to the family. And it was a brother with him. So they sent something to the brother. And these people have gone back to that same Ritz-Carlton now for 5 years in a row because they had that ability. They didn't have to go to a manager and say, can I do this?
Right.
It was
They
like,
just did it.
yeah, we're going to make that right for you,
Yeah.
So yeah, that's really a big deal. Is what you're talking about. People have the authority to make a decision.
It is a big deal. And too many companies are afraid to give people authority. And again, you don't do it overnight. You do it gradually as they, learn the business, but you got to give them authority.
Very good. So, conflicts. I mean, you talked a little bit about what happens when people are yelling at each other and they're not listening and so forth. But any other conflict resolution techniques that help ease tensions in companies or groups that work together?
Yeah, one of them is a strategy that I call communication saturation strategy. That when you are in the midst of this conflict, or you're trying to co-create something, you really have to over communicate. Communication saturation, and it's got to be very, very transparent. So on the platform that I was talking about, I literally put out a weekly budget, or certainly at some point it became monthly, but a monthly budget. This is where we are in expenses, and you can look at it. And people, the barking dogs, would be like, "Well, that's not real." Well, then call the project board, have a conversation direct. You don't need to talk to me about it. Talk to the people who are managing the project, which is the project board. And then when they talk to a peer, and the peer says, "Yeah, that's accurate," then the barking dog gets quiet. We literally did meetings like 2 or 3 times a week. Back then it was by Telebridge line, and then webinars. Go to meetings really before Zoom became active, and we'd get everybody on a webinar once or twice a week and just share all the information that we could. So we just saturated people with information. Things are going in the right direction when complaints decrease and participation decreases. Now,
what does that mean? Participation?
Not as many people are showing up on the webinars.
Oh,
but you have a lot less complaints. Now, if people aren't showing up and the complaints are the same, then you're not giving them information that's helpful to them. But if complaints drop, and you can slow down the saturation of communication, then things are smoothing over. And but we literally had 1 year of communication saturation, where just people were constantly given the opportunity to drop in on calls and webinars and ask questions, and nothing was off limits. Whatever's on your mind is okay, and we would allow people to talk. We'd allow the barking dogs to talk. We'd allow, people that are happy with things to talk. Everybody has a say. The IT people and the marketing people, everyone gets to talk.
That's really good. Let's talk about, here we are, we're post-pandemic. Everyone got on Zoom for a long time. Networking, like you're talking about 900 people in London or people in the chapters at BNI. Did it change for you running this organization during the pandemic in terms of people getting together? I mean, I imagine they weren't allowed to go out in certain countries and meet.
Yeah.
And how has that affected it now? And do you have any suggestions for people that are networking online versus networking in person?
Yeah, I do. We had obviously a lot of changes. So it started, I think, with me at a big convention, a BNI convention, where people said, "Hey, you're the chief visionary officer. What do you see as the future of networking?" And this was in 2017. I said, "The future of face-to-face is online." And they were like, "Are you kidding me? No, you're the founder of this organization." And, at that time, all of our groups met in person. And I'm pretty sure, Jack, I heard a couple of guys over in the corner say, "He's getting old now. He's not quite in touch with reality." And I'm like, "No, seriously, I think the future of face-to-face is online." And I realized I said it too quickly. It was just, it's what I believed, but I didn't lay it up properly. So I spent the next year talking about disruption like Kodak and Sears and Blockbuster, and how they were disrupted by competitors. So I made people a little nervous about the technology, because I was saying the technology, not COVID, but the technology was going to, the metaverse, 3D technology, holographic imaging was going to change the way we meet. And then COVID hit. I'd like to think that I planted the seed, but it was our CEO, Graham Weimiller, who saw that COVID was going to be a really big deal. We transitioned 70 countries in 3 months, a country at a time, from in person to online. We literally moved 9,800 groups who met in person every week to online every week, and
Wow.
we did that for almost 2 years, and it was really really painful. Um, but if you listen to some of my podcasts, and you've been on my podcast, I kind of do a podcast like I'm doing it here. I'm excited and I'm talking about, but my podcasts then were calmer, and I was trying to calm people down. And I would say things like, "Look, your network is a beacon of hope in a sea of fear. We live in a crazy world. We can get through this. We can get through it by working together." And during COVID, we grew. We actually grew. We're one of the few companies in the world, I think, that have 40 years of consecutive growth as an organization. And we even grew during COVID. Now, what's interesting is that what everyone thought I was crazy when I said future face-to-face is online. Today, 68% of our organization meets in person. They've gone back to in person. 16% meets completely online. They never meet in person except for maybe mixers or parties that they'll get together. And 16% is a hybrid where they meet once a month in person and the rest of the month online. Now, back in 2019, people would have said, well, they did say I was crazy. But today, that's what we have. And I think the future is going to be more and more online, 3D, holographic imaging, like Star Wars. And
Hmm.
when we get there, I want to be Obi-Wan Kenobi. That's what I want. Now, here's something amazing.
These are not the droids you're looking for.
That's right. I want to be Obi-Wan. So in December of last year, we had our first BNI meeting where the president was a holographic image at the meeting.
Wow.
It was in Dubai, and one of the members did holographic events where a speaker could come in as a hologram, and they used that equipment. And she showed up as a holographic image, not in person, as a holographic image. She was able to see the room. She ran the entire meeting as a holographic image, and that was just last year. And so, what was crazy sounding 4 years ago has started to happen today, and I think we're going to see more and more of that.
Yeah, my nephew is actually involved in that right now. He's I don't know, he's about 30 something, and working with a number of companies like Disney and so forth to develop that kind of meeting potential. And so you'll be able to go to the movie theater and you can talk, and you'll be on stages all over the world looking like you're right there. That's pretty cool.
I think it's inevitable. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think so as well. And my nephew certainly hopes so because he's doing well. So let me ask you this question. And you started out young, you were a professor for a while, and then you got more into the business side of things. There are new entrepreneurs. We talked about scaling a business. We talked about some of the things you mentioned, like systems and, that kind of stuff that Michael Gerber teaches. And any other, if you were mentoring someone right now that says, hey, I want to be successful, whatever it might be, a speaker, coach, trainer, in this world that we're in of like helping people, et cetera, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, there's a handful of things. One is know your numbers. And as you could tell, I know my numbers. I know the number of chapters that we have. I know the number of members we have. I get a daily report. And so when I tell people you got to know your numbers, you really, really need to know your numbers in order to understand where you're going as an organization. I think one of the biggest mistakes, to give you another one, I think one of the biggest mistakes that people make is chasing bright, shiny objects. And I think that most successful business people understand that you have to do 6 things 1,000 times, not 1,000 things 6 times. And a lot of entrepreneurs do 1,000 things 6 times. They're constantly chasing bright, shiny objects. I talk about this subject a lot, and I keep this in my desk drawer. It's like, don't chase the bright, shiny object. It's not going to take you to success. Yeah. What you want to do, and by the way, it doesn't have to be 6. It could be 5. It could be 7. And people say, well, what 6? Well, the key is, what business are you in? What mentors do you have? What podcasts are you listening to? What experts mentors or virtual mentors do you have that tell you what things that you need to be doing? Then take those themes. Those are the 5 or 6 things that you do over and over and over again. If I have any superpower as a business person, it is that I am a dog with a bone. I am relentless with whatever it is that I'm working on. And that's how we built the company.
That's great.
All right. You want some more on
Sure.
scaling? Okay. So all kinds of people are going to come to you with great ideas. Oh my God. I've had so many people come to me with, oh, I have got this incredible idea. It's going to change your business. It's going to make you so successful. I remember one idea was, he was just off the top of his head. Oh, this is great. It's going to build BNI. And his idea would have cost more than the total gross revenues of the company.
Oh my God.
It's like, let's do the math. And I showed him the math and he was like, oh, okay, never mind. But he was ready for me to go that direction without understanding anything. So on those ideas that are pretty good, but if you don't want to chase those bright, shiny objects and you really want to stay focused on 6 things, what you do with people is rather than say no, because that makes them, it makes them feel like you're not paying attention or you're not willing to hear what they have to say. What you do instead is you say, okay, that's an interesting idea. I like it. Let's put that in the parking lot. And what I used to do when I was running the company is I had a whiteboard in my office and I'd open up this door and I had this thing that said the parking lot. And I would list these ideas. I said, I'm going to put this idea here. Let's connect again. And depending on what the idea was, it was either 6 months or a year from now. And I'd put the date next to it that we would connect. I said, let's talk again in 6 months and see if this idea still rings true as a good idea to pursue. And I got to tell you, Jack, 90% of the time, 6 months later, they'd go, yeah, never mind. I thought it was a good idea at the time, but no. So you don't make them feel like you're not listening to them. You write it down and then you connect with them. And most of the time they'll say no. And occasionally they'll say, yeah, this is still a fantastic idea. Okay, let's see if we can work that into our strategy for the following year to incorporate and test out. So the parking lot strategy is a great way of avoiding bright, shiny objects whenever possible.
Given that you have this amazing international reach, if someone was wanting to go international with whatever they're doing, any core basic thoughts about that?
Yeah. A lot of people want to do it online. It's really hard to make that personal connection online. You really need to go to that country. And I'd recommend that you go to that country with somebody that knows the country. So that, you know, culturally, the things to do and the things not to do. That's really important. In Japan, the Maishi ritual where you hand a card and you bow and hand
This
it.
way, yeah, exactly.
And it's always important to know what hand gestures not to do in certain countries. And you'd be shocked what some hand gestures that are real common in North America is like, no, don't do that when you're in Malaysia. I learned that the hard way. And so you got to go to the country. And if you're part of a network that has an international reach, connect with those people that you have a good connection with already, and ask them if they would, walk you around, introduce you to some people there while you're there. That personal contact is still the most important thing. That's the way I opened up in 70. Yeah. All but 2 countries of BNI opened through referral, where somebody knew somebody. Only 2 countries opened where no one knew somebody.
Oh, cool. I find like where we have the biggest international presence, Dubai, India, Malaysia, Japan, all because I knew somebody there, or they reached out to me and I went there, ran seminars, met with them, maybe wrote a book with them, etc. And then that relationship became the conduit for everything else we did. That's way cool.
You want one more?
Yes. Sure.
Okay, here we go. Peter Drucker, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Culture is the secret sauce of any successful organization. If you really want to build a successful organization, you have to build a healthy organizational culture. And that's got to be based on the core values of the company. So you've already named one of our core values, givers gain, but we have 6 other core values, and we constantly reinforce those core values within the organization. We have education coordinators of every chapter, and they talk about the core values. I've done videos on the core values, and you constantly reinforce the core values like education and traditions and recognition. All of these things are part of the core values, and when you have an organization that lives the core values, you create an amazing culture, and culture beats strategy every day of the week. Strategy is important. I started with systems and talking to you about scaling, but the secret sauce really is culture. That's the key.
It's interesting. I go back to my interview with the Ritz-Carlton people, and one of the things they do, they have a certain set of values. I don't remember all of them right now, but every morning they have these what they call stand-up meetings. They don't last more than 5 or 10 minutes. Yeah. They said that we stand up because as soon as you sit down, it's going to take a whole lot more time. Yeah. And all the people in the front meet together, the room cleaners meet together, and the people in the kitchen. And they'll have one value that day, and they all have to say, how are you going to make sure this value is manifested through your behavior today? What are you going to do to make sure we live this value? And they cycle through those over and over and over. And that's like, I think what you're saying is so critical.
It is. And we have staff meetings, and at our staff meetings, we have usually one person pick, somebody will be called on and say, what's one of the core values that you really like about the organization and why does it resonate with you? And so we have people talk about that. We also do with all new employees, boot camp, employee boot camp, which is like 4 weeks long. And they can start their job, but they're spending a lot of time going to BNI meetings, learning what BNI is, talking to different staff, talking to people globally. And boot camp final is meeting with me, often by Zoom, to talk about the culture of the organization. And because the culture is so incredibly important. As a matter of fact, I did a boot camp this morning with 3 new employees, 2 from India and 1 from Charlotte.
I love it. I love it. There are people who read and then they do what they read. There are people who learn and they actually put it into practice. I would have to say you're probably in the top 1/10 of 1% of people in the world who live that. So I love it.
Thank you. So much value. I love what I do. And I'll leave you with one more because I know we're almost out of time.
Yeah, go ahead.
In terms of scaling a business, you got to work in your flame, not in your wax. And if you want to really scale a business, work in your flame. When you're working in your flame, you're on fire, you're excited, you're passionate about what you do. When you're working in your wax, it takes all your energy away. People can hear that in your voice. They can see it in the way you behave. And so find your flame and work in your flame and hire people to do your wax. I remember the first person I hired in the wax was a bookkeeper. And I remember the bookkeeper one day came to me and said, the book, first month she was with me, the books weren't balanced. They were off by 5 pennies, 5 cents. She said, it took me 2 hours, but I found the 5 cents. And I said, well done, good for you. And I told a friend of mine that, and he said, did you reprimand her for 2 hours to find 5 cents? I said, no, I congratulated her. He said, why would you do that? I said, because 2 reasons. One, if it were $50, she wouldn't go home at night. Right? She'd stay there to find the $50. Me, the second reason, if it were $50, I'd be like, it's close enough because it's not my flame.
It's so funny. I tell a similar story where this woman, I'm not one of those guys that bounces my checkbook to within $1. If the bank wins by $5, I don't want to spend time looking for it. But the person who works for me, I think she has orgasms when she finds those things. Literally, we talk about it being your happy place. What is it? Where's your passion? And when you're in your passion, then your genius comes out. We all have different geniuses. So that's great. Good for you. The one thing I love about you too is you always have these great phrases, work in your flame and not your wax, all these different things. Makes it easy to remember. Yeah. So thanks for that. So as we end up this, which I'm reluctant to do, but we have to, tell people how they can find out more about your books, about BNI, about you. Give them some contact info.
Well, thanks. BNI, you can find information about BNI at bni.com, and that'll take you to all the different countries that we operate in. I also have a blog, ivanmisner.com. I've been blogging since 2007, twice a week. There's tons of free content up there. And my books, you can get pretty much all my books on Amazon and at bookstores.
Good. They're great books.
Thanks.
And we'll put all that in the show notes as well. So anyway, Ivan, this has been a 10 plus experience on a scale of 1 to 10. So thank you very much for joining us today. And all of you listening, thanks for joining us as well. And we'll see you in the future. And Ivan, I'll see you in a week. We're going to a conference together.
Yeah.
So looking forward to that.
Look forward to it. Thanks.
All right, everybody. Yeah. Take care. Bye.